Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to get started on installing the painless wiring harness. Again, this is part number 10150. It's the 21 circuit CJ harness. It is a complete harness. After reviewing through the manual, it is in 3 pieces. This piece attaches to the firewall on the inside. Has your flashers, your main harness comes up over the dash. This actually comes down to the floor for your headlight switch or your high beam switch. This is all your dash hookups, your lights, gauges. This piece attaches in the engine bay and has your engine harness, battery hookups, as well as your headlights, front turn signals, front marker lights. And then this is your rear harness, which will attach, actually attaches, I believe, right here on the main harness. Plugs right into there. And using this six pin connector. And then it will run down the side of the Jeep. From what I understand, basically right down under this groove, on top of this wheel well, and then I'll have to put a hole in because it's not currently existing to drop it down for your tail lights, your rear marker lights, your trailer hitch hookup, everything in the rear of the vehicle here. Now the issue that I am going to have, and a lot of this is just because my tub was essentially built with new pieces, as well as some minor mistakes that I made when I hooked up my slave cylinder. I really should have moved the slave cylinder over about another ½ inch when I installed it. I was a little worried about clearance, and I got a little too close to where the plug goes. I was going to have to open this area up anyway to begin with, because a lot of this metal got adjusted when it was put together. There was actually some metal added in here to be able to actually meet this curve, because the cowl and the firewall, even though they're made by the same company, their curves don't match. So what I've decided to do though is I could elongate these holes and slide the slave cylinder over. I'd have to adjust my mount on the pedal, but I'm very happy with how those pieces work together. Everything's lined up nice. So what I am going to do instead is I'm going to move this hole over a ½ inch, move this hole over a ½ inch. And then since I've got to open this up anyway, I've got a deburring tool that I'll be able to basically nibble this away with. I'm just going to open this up a little bit more so I can fit the plug in, and then everything should clear. The only other thing I'll have to do is my mount for my slave cylinder piston rod. I'm just going to have to cut it right here and take about just under a ½ inch, like 3/8 of an inch off of it. Which basically will just allow everything to just clear easier. So I'm going to go ahead and get those things drilled and modified, and then I'll come back and we'll get basically the 2 pieces installed and mounted, and then start continuing with the installation from there. That worked out pretty good. Got the holes drilled, opened up the box. It's moved over pretty much about 3/8 of an inch, maybe just under just over, right around a ½ inch at most. Opened up, the plug does fit in there, and I just put some fresh paint on the edges, so I'm going to let that dry. And then once that's all dried, we will go ahead and install the plug. And then once the plug's installed, then I'll be able to put the slave cylinder back in and hook that back up as well. Also trimmed where my slave cylinder piston mounts, just so that it'll give it a little extra clearance with this plug when the pedal is pushed in. Now this is not something that's Painless's fault. This has nothing to do with Painless. This is completely to do with my build altogether. If you're replacing your harness and you have a factory harness installed and yours is an OEM tub, you'll probably have absolutely no issues at all. This is again, this is pretty much just because of how my particular build has gone together that I had to make this small modification. So we'll go ahead and once this is dry, we'll get the plug mounted up, get the slave cylinder back in, and then we'll be able to move forward with the harness install. Okay, got the first part of the harness bolted in, fit right in there well. And then you've got to route the harness up and behind the steering column there. This is our dome light. Oh, excuse me here. Let's see if we can focus on here. You end up keeping, obviously there's the hookup for the rear harness, dome light. There's a parking brake switch. Here's your dimmer switch for your high beam. And then there is a ground headlight switch. What else here? Clock that will stay on this side of the column. Back up so you can see. And then the rest comes over. We got parts here that attach to the column, reverse lights, a reverse switch I should say, ignition switch, wipers, heater switch, and then the rest are over on that side. Everything fit in good. I'm going to go ahead right now and actually remount the slave cylinder, get that put in place, make sure everything clears and sits and fits the way we expect, and then we will mount the engine harness onto here. According to the instructions, we got to put some dielectric grease on all these connections, and then bottom line, it slips right in, and then there's a center bolt that you snug up just to lock the two together. Slave cylinder's back in, everything bolted right up, everything clears fine, no issues there. I don't know if you can see, I was a little concerned with my the hitch pin that I used to mount the piston, but because I trimmed it down, it's got plenty of clearance. All right, so everything looks good there. So I'm going to go ahead and, as per the instructions, the next step is for the engine harness, it's going to be to install this section. All right, and then basically we have two leads, one that heads over toward the battery, has a lot of your engine functions as well as battery hookups, and then there's the part that goes up front for your headlights, turn signals, and marker lights. So as per the instructions, we're going to put some dielectric grease in here, and then we're going to go ahead, clip that on, and bolt it into place. All right, that piece slides in very simply. It's got a 3/8 inch hex bolt in the center. It doesn't like click together and then you tighten the bolt. What you kind of do is line it up, and then you actually have to turn the bolt, and that pulls it together. And then you just basically take it till it's nice and snug, and it's good to go there. We're gonna have to go through and sort through these wires and line up which ones go where. I have to add that in the manual for this harness, I'm jumping through the install, as obviously I don't have my instrument panel in place, and I really actually want to get my ignition wired up so that I can actually go ahead and start the motor. But the manual I jumped over, because after you put the bulkhead mount on the inside of the firewall here, they go through the hookups for all these wires, where everything goes, how to hook it up. Again, the manual is like 140, 150 pages, and they go through many different scenarios depending upon what your build may or may not have. I wanted to get the other bulkhead mount in so I can run these wires, get them brought over to this side. Over here, I know it looks kind of like I have a mess, but there is some organized chaos here. Most of these are trigger wires for the coil, for the fans that go with the EFI, switched wires for the EFI and for the fan relays. Just getting all that laid out and into position. so that once I have the wires run, I can hook everything up and put it in its final place. One change that I am going to have to make is, since I'm running an electric fuel pump from Holley, I brought the fuel pump gauge wire up to the front of the vehicle here. Well, it turns out this rear harness, the pink wire right there, is actually a wire that would then run to the rear of the vehicle and tie into the fuel gauge. So what I'm going to do before I install this rear harness is I'm going to de-pin that pink wire, unhook it from this plug, bring that yellow wire over, put one of these Delphi connectors on it, plug it into this so that my fuel gauge wire for the electric fuel pump will then be tied into the harness and feed into the painless harness the way it's supposed to. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and organize these wires, start getting them run, and then we'll come back and show you where they're all headed. So here's the basic separation on these wires. This is your under hood light. Like I said, this is going over toward the battery side. This lead here is for your front lights. I'm not going to run this one all the way into the grill right now. I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to get everything mounted on my firewall and run for the engine. Pretty much going to leave that stuff because when I have the vehicle painted, the fenders are going to come off, the grill's going to come off. Once all those get bolted back on, then I'll have to run it. You got to take these little T sections off to get into the grill. But then, as you can see, here's your headlight, your turn signal, your fender marker light, and then here's the ones for the other side that run across the top of the grill, and we'll then come over to this side. We also have leads for our horn, washer fluid right here, brake safety switch, which my switch is actually dangling from my proportioning valve down there. Have to feed that back up. These are wires for my fuel injection, for my coil, and the ignition box. They have to all get tied in on the other side. I think we're going to go ahead and end this part of the video here for now. I will come back and explain where a lot of this stuff gets hooked up. I need to hook up my controls on my steering wheel for the ignition, which I believe there are just 2 of them there. The ground has to get hooked up. Like I said, I'm going to tie my fuel gauge into the rear harness, and then that will get run. And as I had said earlier, I'm going to have to drill a hole in the back corner here to drop that down. So we'll be back with another part as we get further along and we start getting some of this wiring tied in on this engine side. You've got your blower motor, you've got your power leads to the battery, looks like reverse, and I think that's the 4-wheel drive indicator, alternator, coil, ignition, engine section. In the manual, it goes over how this all ties in, whether you're doing an OEM ignition, whether you've got fuel injection, whether you're doing a GM HEI style ignition, but they go through all those different hookups. So obviously for my particular scenario, it might be different from others, so I've got to go through and make sure we get all that connected correctly. Then we'll get all those wires wrapped and secured and be able to move on to the next step. All right, so we're going to go ahead and end this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave below. If you like what we're doing, like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.